'Tis the season for those irresistible ginger thins, cozy blankets for cuddling by the fire, and making home warm and welcoming. For one-stop holiday shopping, visit your local IKEA or ikea-usa.com/holiday.
Write Night is a talk show with published authors, writers, and content creators discussing both the creative and technical sides of writing, as well as the industry surrounding it, from novels to screenplays to comics and more. And now, here's your host, author Travis I. Sivart.
Gotta wait for all the music to finish. Hello and welcome to Write Night. It's thank you for joining us. Tonight's topic that we're going to have is going to be Dreampunk Press and Wicked Clever Books and Games. Right, Robert?
That's right. You got it.
Woo! Okay. I am Travis Sivart. I am the host and author of, to really just put it out there, over 30 books under 5 different pen names, but primarily under my name, Travis I. Sivart. I have been featured in over 24 other anthologies that were not my own. And, of course, I run this podcast and a few others. So feel free to check those out. But let me introduce my guests. Now, I've had each of these on different various shows at different times, so I adore both of them. And I'm happy to put them into the same virtual room together here. Let's start with you, Tara.
Hi, my name is Tara Moeller, and I am Dreamer-in-Chief at Dreampunk Press, which is a publishing collective. And if you want more information about that, check out the website, because I'm not going to go into the big, long description there. I am also an author. I publish under my own name, mostly novellas of all different sorts, and then also as E.G. Gaddis, which I publish young adult Victorian vampires, steampunk, and I have published 7 novels, including my latest, which is Mechanics of Life.
And those are all separate genres, or are they all jammed up into one book? All the genres you just went through that you write in?
They're all different.
Okay, just checking. I'm sure you combine one or two here and there. Just checking, though. Okay. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt your intro. What else? Okay, that's it then. Pass it over to Robert there. Robert, what do you got?
Hey, my name's Robert Turk. I am an author and game designer. Mm-hmm. I have published, under my own publishing imprint, Wicked Clever, 2 books of short stories, a book of poetry, a coloring book that actually has a story that goes through it as well as the coloring, and a card game about storytelling, and at this point, 4 role-playing games, with 1 more coming to Kickstarter soon. I'm also a freelance author for some bigger gaming companies, and I don't know that I'm allowed to say which ones those are, though. So trust me, I'm out there. You can flip to the cover of the book if my name's in it. Hey, I worked on that one. If it's not, it's probably still a good game. I just didn't work on it.
Works for me. Okay, now, tonight's topic, what we're going to talk about is these guys, individual companies. So, by the way, one of our viewers, Trin here, says, "Ooh, I like coloring." Robert and I were having a conversation not too long ago on a live stream about his coloring book. And a lot of people were amazed that coloring books had a story like a children's book. And I said, when we were growing up in the 70s and 80s, a lot of the coloring books did. And that's something that's kind of missing from coloring books nowadays. It's just cheap line art.
Yeah, you open a coloring book. Like, I've opened my kid's coloring book, and I'm like, well, okay, on this page we got a maze, on this page we got a picture of Superman, and on that page we got Mickey Mouse, which, first of all, copyright infringement all over the place, but second of all, there's no through line.
So that was an interesting tidbit. To go on about the topic, I want to talk about each of your guys' companies. So, Tara, where you didn't necessarily go into a long-winded thing, you're going to have a chance. Robert, the same for you and it's what you do. And what I'll do is I'll start right here with my stuff. I have Talk of the Tavern Publishing. Kind of like Tara's, it started out as a Talk of the Tavern Publishing group. It was a collective. And back when I started self-publishing was a bit of a stain on your name because there wasn't a lot of quality control initially by the people doing it. There was, and there is still some, but not as much. There was just no gatekeepers in the sense of quality. And people put trash out. So having an imprint, having a publisher, even if it's one you just made up yourself, lent you some credibility. It was a silly thing. It's like putting on a cape to say you're a superhero. You don't have to, but people go, cape must be a superhero. And that's what I did. And since then, I don't think anybody else has published under it. I've published my different pen names under it, but that's about it. But these guys have gone further. Whether it's with their professionalism, such as where Robert went, and I'm guessing legality on both of your cases too, registering certain trademarks or whatnot, but I'm going to let them talk to that first. First thing, I guess what we could start with is, what do you guys think? Do we want to start with why you did it, or what your company's about, or just start bouncing the ball back and forth? Who's got some stuff to say about this? Robert, let's start with you. And then you just...
All right.
We'll have Tara cut you off when she gets excited.
Okay, that works. I like that format. That's awesome. So I started as a entertainer, performing as Ganner Stitch the Goblin in full costume as a goblin character at fairy festivals and Renaissance festivals, and telling stories on stage. And I stopped telling stories on stage because I wasn't getting the audience that I wanted. Like, I wasn't telling little kid, dragons flying through space stories, although that's a cool story. It wasn't what I was telling. I was telling, like, violent, bloody goblin stories and getting fussed at by parrots. So I stopped telling my stories, but one of my friends a couple years later was like, why don't you put these into a book? And I'm like, yeah, it's not what I do. I tell stories on stage. And they're like, no, you really need to put these on the book. And then I met Travis, who is putting stories into books. And he essentially walked me through the process of being able to do my very first book, Completely Inappropriate Tales of Ganner Stitch the Goblin.
Great book, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, and kind of showed me that it was possible, and gave me some pointers to find the things to be able to self-publish. And then I did a Kickstarter for that, and that was my deal. I'm like, I am not investing a lot of money into a one-off book. I'm only writing this one dang book.
You know my favorite part of that book? The acknowledgments.
We're talking about editing later, aren't we?
The whole night.
So there were some mistakes in the first printing of that book. But I realized that I really loved the process, that I loved that style of storytelling, and that it made my stories more accessible to a wider audience. So after I wrote that first book, and I sold that first book to people, and they're like, where's the second book? And I'm like, what do you mean, where's this? I wrote you one damn book. And then it was like, okay, I'll write a second book. And I got to enjoy it. And writing a book means I don't have to put on makeup. I don't have to sleep in a tent. I don't have to get out there.
Can I give
Go ahead.
a number story of yours?
Yeah, go for it.
I just want to make sure you don't mind me mentioning numbers. Now,
I don't know numbers.
When Robert first did this, I was very excited for him. He did a little different than me. He did print, if I'm not mistaken, privately, and got boxes of books sent to his doorstep, but then he could lug those to conventions to sell in person. Now, right. I had been going to conventions and selling books for a while. I had, 2, maybe 3 at that point in time. And, I would sell over a 2.5-day weekend. 20, maybe 25 books. Tara was right up there with me at this point in time. And then Robert came home from his first or second event. I'm like, how'd you do? He's like, I sold 75 the first day. And I'm just like, wow. And I was so torn.
And I was disappointed.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed.
Yeah, and I was so torn between, like, really just, like, throwing my hands up and cheering and then just swearing at them. Just, like, both sides of me were just like, what do I do? But,
Well, because conventions that I had been to before, I was making leather masks and stuffed goblin dolls and performing. And so I had this idea in my head about how much product I should move in a given day at a convention of a given size. And so I set that at 100 books on Friday, 100 books on Saturday, and 50 to 75 books on a Sunday. I thought, that's a good, solid weekend of sales. Unrealistic weekend of sales, I now know. But so I came home to 75 books on that day, and I was like, I didn't hit my goal. And Travis was like, well, that's okay. It's your first time out. What was your goal? And I said 100 books. And yeah.
Yeah, see, my goal is the same as his if you chop off the last number of every one of his goal. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with 10 each day and, 7 on the last day.
So, yeah.
Okay. More about your company. Go on.
I don't know. I've totally lost my train of thought.
Well, let's do this.
No,
You've designed.
Pass it over to.
Okay, yeah, let's jump over then. Tara, let's give you a little chance here. Tell us a little bit about Dreampunk Press. What's your origin story? Put on the cape. Tell us.
So Dreampunk Press started was in a workshop with some other authors. We decided to create a little writing group, and we were talking about putting something together so that we were publishing under a name, doing our own thing, and self-publishing, but in a group. And then one lady got a contract, and another lady had a job change of sort. She was a teacher, and she kind of shifted into some politics because of what was happening in her own community, and her writing went on the way to the bias side.
Was that Michelle Obama?
No.
Just checking. Go on.
No. Because I'd name drop. But so I continued on, and I published my first book under Dreampunk Press, which is registered as a cooperative with the federal government. In that, and in the paperwork for that, Dreampunk Press itself makes no money. Everything is to the collective of authors. Each author gets their own chunk of money. And so it's their royalties. And soon after I had published my first book as E.G. Gaddis's Vampire Heritage, which, I grossly overestimated how many I was going to sell, and I bought a bunch.
And when you're done with this thought, Trin has a question. What do you mean cooperative with the government? So if you want to explain the technical side of that. It means she turns you in. Run, guys!
Shit's the feds.
It means that Dreampunk Press is official. It's registered. It has an EIN number, etc. As a business. However, it's registered as a cooperative, which is an actual term. So when you think of it, it's a bunch of people getting together. All of the authors that are involved in Dreampunk Press are owners of Dreampunk Press. Dreampunk Press makes no income. The authors do. The idea is we pool funds for website marketing, etc. We pay for our own marketing. We pay for our own editing. And then our books are on a single website under that banner to try to, in some way, to pool our costs.
Okay. So
hopefully
back to
that kind of explains it.
Yeah,
it's kind of like
after
a farm code.
The first sentence,
but with books.
You had it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and for anybody else, there's other types of things you can register with the government, LLC.
You know the old saying, selling like hotcakes? What does that even mean? What is a hotcake anyway? They should change it to selling like Hondas, because right now Hondas are selling faster than ever. Probably because they're so rugged, long-lasting, and fuel-efficient. And if you want one, you should get to your local Honda dealer right away. Check out the 8-passenger Pilot, or maybe the Adventurous Passport. But you gotta do it fast because Hondas are selling like, well, Hondas. New models are arriving now. Don't wait. See your local Honda dealer today.
Not-for-profit, et cetera. This is just a type of registering a business that takes care of things.
Yes.
And Raven, to answer your question, Raven asked, are you still able to list your books on Amazon or KU? The answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Which, by the way,
Press.
I'm going to jump in here real quick and interrupt everybody, because what I forgot to say is, for anybody listening to this on podcast, we have a live in-chat audience. We record our podcast live at twitch.tv/Travis Tavern Talk, and we have our subscribers here asking questions and interacting with us. When you hear this noise, that means I want to read a comment off the screen. Now, for those of you in our live chat, we're recording a podcast, which means we're only going to be reading off the most relevant or entertaining questions. So aim for that, or all of them, depending on how many tangents we run around on. Tara, are you monitoring chat at all, by the way?
No, because this is my first time with the Discord interface.
It's okay. Tell us the website. They need to know both your websites. Robert, if you're monitoring it, go ahead and just drop it in the chat. But say it out loud, too. Go ahead, Tara.
So Dreampunk Press is www.dreampunkpress, DREAMPUNKPRESS.com.
There you go. And Robert, what's yours?
Mine is Wicked Clever, but it's wicked-clever.com.
There we go.
Just the words like they're spelled in the dictionary. Somebody else already had without the dash,
of course.
And they tried to sell me the website for $3,000, and I was like, I'll take that dash for free.
There you go. A smart businessman right there. There we go. Thank you, Wordwin. Thank you, Robert, for popping those into chat also. So once again, that's wicked-clever.com for Robert and dreampunkpress.com for Tara. Tara, go on with your origin story. Sorry to totally derail us there.
It's okay. I ordered, and I was printing my books through CreateSpace, but Dreampunk Press owns its own ISBNs. So all of the ISBNs for any author published with Dreampunk Press has a Dreampunk Press associated ISBN. So I can put them wherever we want to put them.
As long as you don't put it on the Kindle exclusive thing.
I can even put it on Kindle exclusive. I just can't put it anywhere else. And I just can't publish an EPUB until we're done.
There we go. That's what I'm saying. If you're making it exclusive with Amazon by that agreement holds.
Right. But you can publish a book to Kindle without that agreement.
Correct. Yes.
In which case then you can have a Mobi Pocket, you can have an EPUB, you can have a DAISY file, which is a file that reads it out loud, but it is considered, because it's not an audiobook, so it's the same type. It's still an ebook type thing.
Right. Kindles have that feature now too, where they'll read out any book, but it's a flawed technology at this point in time.
Daisy's pretty good, but you can publish those wherever. For instance, we now put the books into Ingram and into Amazon, into the KDP. There's some reasons for that. We can go into that a little bit later, but we own our own ISBNs. We have our website with the books there. They're on Amazon. They're in Ingram so that bookstores can order.
Excellent. Let's move back over here to Robert and poke him. Because now I don't have a lot more to add to this on my side of things. But Robert, I want to start with your role-playing games. Because it was, 4 to 5 years ago you started toying with the idea of doing the first one, and now you have 4 going on 5. Is that correct?
4 going on 5. Yeah, so the first role-playing game that I wrote is available on Drive-Thru RPG, but it's not available in physical form anywhere anymore. It was called Are You Mental? And it was a game about lunatic superheroes escaping the insane asylum to go out and save the world. And I believe that was 2014. I could be off by a year on that. But I wrote that game because I was asked, as my character Gandersnitch the Goblin, to come run some Dungeons & Dragons games at a convention as Gandersnitch. And I was like, okay, but if I'm running Dungeons & Dragons games, people are going to expect to play Dungeons & Dragons by the rules. And this character doesn't do anything by the rules. So there's a disconnect. It's not going to work. Let me make my own game that would be Gandersnitch's interpretation of what a role-playing game is. So it used decks of cards and all of the dice that you own. Absolutely every single dice that you own. And it was a fun, silly party-style game is what I called it. Pick up and play. You didn't have to know any rules. You didn't have to know anything. The game just walks you right through it. And you got to spend 3 or 4 hours playing a lunatic superhero. Characters were made Mad Lib style. So everybody would answer some questions, tear them up, pass them around. That created your character. Grab a handful of dice, and off you go. And it was I was just playing it off of index cards and Post-it notes at conventions. And for a year, everybody was like, at the end of the game, where do I buy this? I was like, oh, no, you don't buy this. I just made it to run at conventions.
Wait a minute.
And
didn't we hear the same story about your short stories?
Yes! Yes. My buddy Dave thinks that I just have an inability to realize when there is money to be made. And he could be right.
I don't know. I've seen some of the outfits you wear. I expect you know when there's money to be made.
So it took me about 4 or 5 conventions over the course of a year before I realized people weren't saying, where can I buy this? People were saying, please let me buy this. I want to take it home and play it at my own table. And so I had to figure out how to publish a game, which is a little bit different than publishing a book, especially when your game has cards. And I no longer print cards and put them in little tins because that's really printing a board game, and a whole slew of headaches there. But that was the first one. But after I had done it, I was like, okay, now let's actually make the role-playing game set in Gandersnitch's world, Goblonia. And that was going to be my next role-playing game. I even have a flyer that said, like I passed out at Gen Con, coming next year, the role-playing in the world of Gandersnitch Goblonia. That was 4 years ago. Yeah, going on 5 years.
Well, I'll have you know, I feel you're very consistent, because though you have published 4 or so other role-playing games, Goblonia is still your next role-playing game.
It is.
So you're right on that.
I'm Robert, on it. It is coming next year.
What I'd love to go into in brief, and then we'll pass it over to Tara, because I want to hear a little more about Dreampunk Press and what they do. Not the collective side, the writing side, the fonts, which I feel is very important. But before we do that, Robert, I want to give you a little more time here. Let's talk about what does go into a role-playing game that's so different from a normal book. And what I'm looking at here is not just the publishing aspect and the writing aspect and the art aspect. Those are important and definitely hit those. But the play testing aspect. I think that is utterly important, that most people don't even realize how important that play test, your beta readers, if you will, are.
Right. Right. So when you write a book, or at least when I write a book, when I write a short story or a novel,
he uses crowns and toes.
I have a group that I have curated over the years of trusted beta readers, or maybe even alpha readers sometimes, that on Google Docs, I open it up after my first draft, not even after my second draft, and I'm like, folks, give this a read. Give me your feedback. Let me know how you're feeling about stuff. Don't tell me when I spelled a word wrong. Let me know how it makes you feel. And that's how I write a book. And then I take that feedback and I polish it. And then I successively get narrower and get specific readers and editors and all that. When I'm making a game, the game might not be done when we start playtesting. I might just have an idea. and I've got to work out mechanics, and I've got to see how things. I don't have a full story yet. I don't have anything yet. Goblonia has been in playtesting now for months, and it's been off and on, because what I'll do is I'll take the ideas that I have and I'll throw them at a group and I'll sit them down at the table and we'll play it and we'll see what works and what doesn't work, and I will see pacing and how things interact with each other, and the expression on my players' faces if they're frustrated, or the questions they ask. In playtesting one of my games, Weird Scouts, first time I playtested with kids because it's a family game, to sort of illustrate that, there was a young lady sitting at the table who was very excited because she had finally earned her first level up and gotten a new power, and she thought the power gave her a magical pet. All right? And I was like, no, the power lets you talk to magical animals. And she's like, oh, okay, that's cool too. And driving home, she handled it very well, very mature. Driving home, I realized that kid was right. Sure, it's cool to talk to magical animals, but that kid wanted a pet. And that kid was excited about getting a magical pet in the game.
Let me make this clear. Yes.
That does.
Because whenever I play an online video game, yeah, I want a pet. It's just awesome.
Right. So that's what the power does. But playtesting, it's a back and forth. I can't write a book, hand it over to beta readers, do a second draft, hand it over to an editor, do my final draft, and publish it. Not with a role-playing game. It's a process. It's a dialogue. It's a constant back and forth. And you have to shape the process to get what you want out of it.
And it's also trying to break the game along the way.
Yes, I have players that specifically attempt to break the game. That's just the kind of people they are. And that's important.
It is.
I don't want a reader to tell me, this sucks, which I've had. This sucks because there's no dragons in it. This is a book about zombies. I don't know why you think there'd be dragons in it. But in a game, I want those jerks. And
right.
One of them at every table.
That's
to
right.
be like, so I don't think you intended for me to do this, but watch how I'm going to totally wreck your game right here, right now. And, okay, thank you. I'm going to call him out. His name is Dave. Thank you, not the Dave you know. Thank you, Dave. I now need to plug that hole. I see where you're coming from. I need to clarify something. I need to change a mechanic here. Or, hey, is the way you just broke the game really awesome, really cool, and most importantly to me, is it fun? And if it is, I need to make that a feature. I need to make sure everybody knows you can, because it's part of the game.
I think that's a really healthy outlook. Can we pass it to Tara, or do you have anything?
Yeah, go for it, Tara.
And then you can jump back on stuff, because we can tangent, just considering I know everybody has to go to bed sometime tonight. I don't want to stretch it too far for our sake. Tara, tell us a little bit about, not the technical side, the heart of Dreampunk Press and your concepts behind it, because you went in this with some very specific thoughts, ideas of how to capture other audiences that most people don't even realize are lacking in material.
So one of the things with Dreampunk Press is we are friendly LGBTQIA 2S+.
They've added more.
But we're not doing the angsty stories.
Tell that story, because you went somewhere to publish something.
So, so sometimes one of our young authors had, and this is for Sport. Sport is the name of the book. It is about a young man discovering his sexuality, suspecting he might be bisexual.
At Capella University, education is as smart as the world around us. With the FlexPath format, you can take classes at your own pace, set your own deadlines, and even leverage your previous experience to move faster. Now that's smart. Learn more at capella.edu.
'Tis the season for those irresistible ginger thins, cozy blankets for cuddling by the fire and making home warm and welcoming. For one-stop holiday shopping, visit your local IKEA or ikea-usa.com/holiday.
Sexual.
By? Do you want to name the author,
By.
please? No, name the author.
Mix Know-It-All.
There you go. So you guys can find that on Amazon and other places. Go on, Tara.
And this book was pitched to an agent by this young author. And they said, oh, hey, we want to see the whole manuscript. So this young author sent the manuscript in, and I'm going to do full disclosure here. It's my kid. I used to drag them around to conferences with me. They decided to write. And they wrote this beautiful manuscript. And then the agent sent back and said, it's not gay enough.
Yep.
The main character
What year
is a
was
young
this?
man discovering his sexuality. How much gayer can it be?
What year was this? Because it's different even now.
Yes, we're talking
2013, 2014?
Yeah,
Okay.
2014, maybe 2015. Actually, I think Dreampunk Press published it in 2015, so we're probably talking 2014 for this agent.
Okay.
And what it came down to is they wanted the horrible. They wanted the parents to be like, oh my God, I'm going to kick you out. And for my kid, who is definitely on that spectrum, that was not their reality. When they came out, my husband and I were like, well, yeah, we already knew one. And kids need to see those stories as well. The angst in this story had nothing to really do with this kid's discovering his sexuality. This was a distraction from the angst and the conflict of the story for this kid. So there is, in the publishing industry, they're like, oh yes, we'll publish those books, but they want them to be painful. They want them to be sad, and that is not what we publish. We want to publish the kind of books that I wish my kid had in middle school to read, that was accepting of the fact that kids don't always know what their sexuality is in middle school, and they're going to do some exploration and discovering of themselves. And because they need to see themselves. Not every kid who is on that spectrum and identifies as one of those acronyms, one of the letters in that acronym. A lot of them, there's more than one would think, have very accepting parents, because the narrative that has been put out is that's not it.
And Wordwin here says, that kind of reaction from the publisher is why I have a disclaimer on my Patreon. Because Wordwin writes in that area also. Have a lot of viewers and listeners who do. So this is one reason I was very excited to bring this in and talk about Dreampunk Press in case anybody is looking for this kind of material to read or that kind of publisher. Yes, Robert?
I'm looking for, not to read, but for my kids. I want them to have access to these kind of books. And I don't write those kinds of storylines because that was not my experience. So I don't want to write. I mean, does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't want to write things I don't know because I want to be truthful to my readers.
Well,
but absolutely, I want, because we're accepting as parents, and I'm thrilled. I wrote down your website. Glad you're doing this. I've got it up in another tab because I want these books for my kids.
Tara, what has this grown into over the past, I guess going on 7 years now? Yeah.
The end of this year will be 9 years.
9. Okay.
Yeah, Vampire Heritage was published in 2012, November 2012.
Okay. So what has it grown into?
So we now have a lot of books. We have, hold on, I've got to
pull up the information.
My mother got sick at one point. Things petered off. My mother passed away in 2018, and we're back in. So there was a little bit of a lull there where this was not my main focus. My kid, Morven, and I, after my mother passed, we're like, hey, we're going to make this work. And kind of once we got that mindset, we had another author who is dyslexic. Get into using open dyslexic in a minute if I get a chance. But we have this author. I have another author who is considering a contract right now for their YA novel. And I just got a signed contract in. And again, I say contract, but it's really not a contract. It's more of a memorandum of understanding of that they're joining this collective of authors and they understand their responsibilities. We're going to be publishing our first children's book in 2022. So nice. We're growing. We've got authors coming in who understand what we're doing. Because I've had authors, kind of say, well, what do you do? And when they understand that kind of it is, it's a collective, which means if you want me to read your book, I need you to be willing to read and give me feedback on mine. You're going to have somebody edit it. It's a requirement for quality purposes. And trust me, I'm going to be able to tell when I read it that whether or not you had an editor look at it or not, because that's my day job. But yeah, we're growing. It's great.
Real quick, if I could jump in, Wordwin says, from my FAQ, what the heck does LGBT friendly mean? Answer, I don't consider myself a writer in the LGBT genre because I don't write about the issues which face the community. The sexuality of my characters isn't a point of plot or development, simply a part of who they are. In short, consider the difference in writing about lesbianism and writing a story with lesbians. So, that's from somebody else's point of view, which, adds to this.
Yes, because that is in my books. The books that I write. Mm-hmm. Yes, I identify as demisexual, mm-hmm. And that is part of that spectrum. It's part of the A. Mm-hmm. And I did some exploratory with my Clan Campbell series. But for the most part, in my stories, it is the other characters in there and their friends. They exist in this world that I'm writing in as full human beings. And I'm not writing about the angst. And I'm usually not writing from their point of view unless I'm doing a a lot of times I write from a single point of view. Mm-hmm. A couple of times I have written from more than one. And in that case, I might get into the head of a character that is in that spectrum. And then I usually have a sensitivity reader read that for me. Not always my kid, because sometimes it's not how they identify.
Right.
One of the things that Dreampunk Press has is a line of books, and they are identified in this line, where the author themselves is LGBTQIA2S+, somewhere in there. And we differentiate that from the rest of our novels where we're friendly to, where they exist in the world. We recognize them because they're in our communities, but we're not usually writing from their perspective.
No,
if that helps anybody.
Let's go ahead.
What I mean by LGBTQIA.
Define that.
The acronyms.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Now, most people know at least the first 4, if not the first 7. Yeah. But let's go into all of it, just in case we have somebody who's like, what
there's a couple new ones for me that to be honest, I just learned today, and so I've been practicing saying all of them because they're very important. The L is, of course, lesbian. The G is gay. B is bi. T is transsexual, transgender. Mm-hmm. Sorry. The Q is queer or questioning, mm-hmm. Meaning you're not sure where you identify, but you're not exactly straight. I is for intersex, mm-hmm. where you're actually born with the sexual characteristics of not just a single gender.
Okay.
That includes hormones, by the way, just so you know.
Okay.
The A is asexual. It does not mean ally. It means asexual, and that's where I fall in there. Demisexuals and gray sexuals fall under that. Asexual, you've experienced no sexual attraction. A demisexual is you really have to know a person before you actually experience that, which is where I'm at.
Bit of an emotional connection before there's a sexual attraction.
Which is why, like, I, met my husband and was, okay. And then one time I'm like, okay, I like this guy. Then the last part, the two S's, actually means two-spirit.
Okay, very good.
It is the indigenous, it's an English term,
right?
Okay, but it encompasses that group of people that indigenous peoples accepted, and it's really not covered by the other initials in there because it was very different. It was a very accepting, and it is the idea that male and female exist together in an individual.
Right. And that is something
it's not a non-binary thing.
Right.
That both genders are existing within an individual, and indigenous peoples accepted the expression of that.
And that's something I've identified with since my late teens when I first discovered that's a thing somewhere. So it's kind of nice
Gender
to hear that.
fluidity,
right,
is a term that some of us might be more familiar with. Yeah.
So we got them all there.
I think so.
Okay.
And then the plus, because that's for everybody that
right,
kind of sort of
doesn't have a letter.
Demisexuals that doesn't, yeah.
And here's something else I'm going to say. Whatever your experience is, be gentle with others who don't get all this, don't understand all this. It is constantly changing and developing. This is why I mentioned when I first asked Tara, what year did that happen? Because our society as a whole is going through a shift and a sway, and there's always bumps in that road. And trust me, creating a conversation instead of confrontation is going to do everybody better in the long run and the short run. Okay, so you mentioned dyslexia. And again, this is something that's very key to what you're doing with Dreampunk Press. Let's talk about that for a moment, then pop back over to Robert. Robert's eyes went wide, like, I don't know what to add to that.
2016, Marvin, doing some research for probably a paper for school, stumbled across Open Dyslexic Font, which is a font, it's a weighted font that was developed specifically to try to help those with dyslexia to read. The Open Dyslexic font that I use is currently in version 3. And if you go to opendyslexic.org, O-R-G, you can download it for free.
No.
You can load it into your e-reader or whatever.
Can I direct you?
And we publish using that font.
I want to direct you to one story you told me when you were at a convention of a woman who bought a book and her husband who had no interest in the books. But if you can tell that story, that is a great shining example of this. Go on.
Yes, because I love that story. So I think it was GalaxyCon, which is in Richmond, Virginia. And a woman was going around looking at books. She was definitely a reader. Her husband was with her, obviously kind of trailing. He was more interested in some other things. And she stopped by the table and we were talking a little bit, and I mentioned, and she opened the book and she's like kind of frowning and going, and I said, oh, this is Open Dyslexic Font. And she happens to look over at her husband, who is looking down and just staring at the page. And she looked at him and said, what? And he goes, I'm not panicking. I'm not getting anxious. He's looking, he goes, it's actually rather calming. He had dyslexia.
How old was
I
he?
had no clue.
How old was he?
Oh, he was in his mid-30s.
Okay, go on.
And his wife was like, oh, okay, so she bought one of the books, and I told them about it. I wrote down where they could go get this font and whatnot. And she came back the next day to buy the other two in the series, and to relay to me that her husband, they'd gone and they downloaded this font, and he was a carpenter, and he would always have some problems because he would use his phone to do calculations and stuff and to see what it was that he was supposed to be made, because he did it custom. They downloaded this font, got it into whatever the app was that he was using, and she said he loved carpentry, but he usually really enjoyed it when he didn't have to rely on specifications. And she said that font, he came in, he loved it because he could actually read the specifications, and he wasn't getting nervous. He wasn't getting anxious because he couldn't, to check and check and check that he was doing it right. The font does not work for everybody, depending on the severity of your dyslexia and whether you're more dyslexic with dyslexia or whether you trend more for dyscalculia, which guess I'm over there, which is a numbers thing. But for some, it helps. I love reading in this font. So that is one of the reasons we actually published in a traditional font called Deja Vu, because there are some readers who have difficulty with Open Dyslexic. A lot of times older readers, and I think it's just because they're so used to Times New Roman.
Mm-hmm.
And just Deja Vu it's a fatter one. It's a little bit easier to read than straight up Times New Roman. But then we also published the exact same book, separate ISBN, so you can make sure you're getting the right one, in Open Dyslexic. We have them formatted so they're about, every so often there's a couple of pages difference. One will be a couple of pages longer than the other. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't cost any more to get it. And I've got a couple of friends with dyslexic kids who bought them. It's like, yeah, actually they read it. They're not big readers because by this point they're middle school, early high school, and they just haven't developed that love of reading because they haven't, it was difficult. Yeah. But I've had a couple of friends that they actually read the book, and it wasn't too hard for them, because it does help. And like I said, it really depends on how your dyslexia manifests, as to how much it can help. But check out the website if you think, they've got examples. You can download it, check it, see if it helps. It's free.
It's Trin would like, can you tell me the book titles?
All of them?
Yeah. So anything on dreampunkpress.com, Trin. Yes. Now, I'd like to redirect us, since we're kind of coming up to the end of the episode here.
Except Pick Me and Hal, because we can't find the originals to put it in Open Dyslexic.
Okay. I want to shift.
We're working on it.
I want to shift us to what you guys have coming up next, what you're looking at. And I want to shift it over to Robert here real quick, because I know he's got something he's working on. Robert, do mention your streaming also, and where they can find you on that. And anything else, and then we'll wrap this one up. Robert, what do you got coming up? What are you working on?
Well, I've got coming up the role-playing game Goblonia. It's my next role-playing game. No.
What kind of role-playing game is this?
Well, so this is a game in which you are goblins. You are not the heroes of your own story. You are goblins in the goblin city of Goblonia, which I don't actually know if you can see the map in the stream behind me, but I've got a map of and it's this blob here in the middle. It's a tiered city, all stacked up like an anthill or a termite mound, and everybody just lives on top of each other, buildings crumbling in. It's sort of steampunk, sort of fantasy, but more fairy tale fantasy than like Dungeons & Dragons fantasy. And you are goblins in your city that you all have founded and lived there goblin-y, not peacefully, but goblin-y for hundreds of years. And here comes Titania, the queen of the fairies, moves in, takes it over, says, nope, you're objects again, and we need your efforts to fight in our war against the trolls. So it is a game about sticking it to Titania, one madcap scheme at a time. It's about plotting and scheming and doing wacky hijinks, running around your city, trying to make things worse for the occupying forces.
What's the system like?
So the system is a system that I wrote. It's influenced a little bit from the Forged in the Dark system, which goes back to Apocalypse World, in that it's a very storytelling-focused system. And the goal here is that anything you want to do, you can do. Mechanically, you can figure out a very simple way to do it. Instead of dice, though, we played for years with dice, and something just wasn't clicking with it. And one of my playtesters, who was having a really hard time understanding the dice mechanics, says, this is kind of like poker. And I said, yes, it is very much like poker. And he said, so why aren't we using poker? And all my other role-playing games, except for one, are based on cards. So I reworked the whole system. Like, dice is a role-playing game with dice is a stretch for me at this point. So it works a little bit like poker. It is based off of a standard deck of cards, but everybody has their own deck. So like dice, you can get your own fancy colored dice and customize it. You can get, I have all sorts of, I've started collecting poker decks. I got all sorts of fancy poker decks. And so everybody has their own deck of cards that they play with.
Very good.
And that is coming to Kickstarter at the end of April, more than likely. We have not set a firm date because we're working on setting up some live play shows of that.
And that's April, Robert. It's April 2021, in case somebody's listening to the podcast 3-4 years from now.
April 2021. If it's past that date, more than likely you can get it at our website, wicked-clever.com. And I have started streaming, like Travis said. I've started streaming on Twitch, and I do 2 shows a week. One, talking about role-playing games and making maps to support your story. And I do that all on screen so you can see when I'm chatting with people. And the other one, hanging out, drinking tea and talking. You can find that, twitch.tv, Wicked Clever. No dash, just Wicked Clever. I know, they went...
That's twitch.tv/Wicked Clever.
There's a slash instead of a dash. There you go.
Wordwin says, I feel like you're missing an opportunity by not aiming for April 1st.
We will not be ready April 1st. So this game is much further along than any other game I've taken to... So pretty much all of the writing at this point is done. A few examples have to go in. It's not edited. It's not formatted. And it is the public playtest is out there at our website with the dash, wicked-clever.com.
And don't you stream that on Friday nights?
I don't stream it on Friday nights. Okay. I play a private playtesting game on Friday nights. I play once a month, we do a Patreon game of it. We are going to be live streaming it starting on Sundays in April.
There you go.
We're trying to nail that down. And we want the live streams to start before we launch the Kickstarter. So we're getting with the actors.
Watch his website for those dates to be announced,
yes.
So you can watch a live game. And will pre-recorded games be available anywhere else before that?
Yes, there are pre-recorded games available right now on YouTube from the Nat21 Twitch channel. They normally do live Dungeons & Dragons games, but they also host other cool games. So we did a Christmas, New Year's sort of special with Bologna to put it out there. That is available. I will find a link.
There you go.
I don't know it.
Now, Tara, what's coming up for Dreampunk Press? And then we'll wrap this up for this episode.
I'm going to plug Mechanics of Life again. It just came out this month. And limited edition hardcovers are available in a special book box from our website, www.dreampunkpress.com. April 19th, Little Pink Book, the second novel from Zara Johns, will be out. And we will have a limited edition box for that, too, with the hardcover in it.
No.
August time frame. Creed of the 21 Dragons, Goldthorn should be out. And in October, the final book in the trilogy that started with The Secret of Magic and Dragons and went to The Truth About Magic and Dragons will be out, and that is titled The End of Magic and Dragons. That is by T.L. Frey.
Now, do you also want to talk about the email I received from Dreampunk Press recently for submissions, or do you want to keep that out of this?
No, I'll mention it, but you have to
please.
subscribe because I'll be sending it out again. But right now, we have a call out for short stories. It will be for October 2022 is our the publication date that we're aiming for, and we're looking for between 8,000 and 10,000 words. We are paying for these short stories, by the way. And the big thing is, it is horror, but not gore. You know, we want scares, but we don't want blood-curdling yuck. Because we are, we're looking at middle school kids through teens into adults reading these. We just need the scare to kind of happen and evolve around a Halloween event.
Do you want to mention...
if you want more information...
Go ahead.
And how to submit and all of that lovely things, if you go ahead and subscribe to our newsletter, I'll be putting it out again in March.
Can I mention what you're paying? Because that's a very impressive thing. Guys, Dreampunk Press and Tara here is offering a payment of $100. That's $100. That's a great pay scale. Plus a limited edition hardcover version of the anthology. So keep that in mind.
You will be able to get discounted copies of paperbacks for friends and stuff if you want to give them as gifts.
John says, darn, I only do stories for free. John, you can always just ask for extra copies of the book, maybe. I don't know. Or offer the payment up to a charity of your choice. That is always an option also. So, once again, Robert can be found at wicked-clever.com. Check out all his stuff. And Tara at dreampunkpress.com. Please check them all out. Now I'm going to do our closing stuff here. So, if you do want to email us thoughts about this show, this topic, if you didn't catch our email, you can always email me at rightnightshow@gmail.com, and I can get you that information. Or if you have a certain message, an announcement of a book you have coming out, anything like that, a birthday wish for somebody, you can also email that. Make sure you support the other podcasts, such as Talk of the Tavern. You can find our podcasts on all the big podcast distributors, from Pandora and Spotify on down. And I want to thank everybody here on the live show for all your comments and input and support through bits, subscriptions, grabbing merchandise, hosting, rating, and all the other fun stuff we do here. I also want to personally make sure I thank my Patreon supporters, people such as Triple U and Ethan Strauss, and my monthly PayPal subscribers, such as Musical Wizardry and Berta. That's it for this episode. Make sure you check out the other episodes. I know we're going to have these guys as guests on a couple, so look for them again, and we will catch you guys later. Let's dance our way out.
Thank you for joining author Travis I. Sivart and the other writers, content creators, and all-around amazing people for our discussion here on Writing. Join us again soon, and until you do, make sure you create with passion, enjoy the journey, and remember, every night can be right.
At Capella University, education is as smart as the world around us. With the FlexPath format, you can take classes at your own pace, set your own deadlines, and even leverage your previous experience to move faster. Now that's smart. Learn more at capella.edu.